Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this 26th day of April, and I hope you all had a wonderful long weekend. And what a busy long weekend it was. Yes, that's right. There's been so much things that have been happening. I personally have taken part in quite a few of the events. We had the Minister Alex Hogg and his dinner function, the Mubarak Mosque, and where we had the fasting in your religion forum, and I was called upon to fill in the shoes, very big shoes, of Swami Atmeswarananda, who could not be there because of health conditions. And of course, yesterday was the Anzac Day, and lots happened. So, well, let's take a look at what's happened with Anzac Day and how Australians celebrated it yesterday. Well, I will put on my comments after this.
In the dark before dawn, they came in their thousands. Veterans, their families and ordinary Australians from across the country. Marking the 107th anniversary of the landings at Gallipoli and the sacrifices made by tens of thousands of Australians since.
We give thanks for those who have served this nation of ours, including those who serve Australia and her interests today.
Eased COVID-19 restrictions meant more people were allowed to attend, and more than 18,000 turned out for the dawn service.
2 years ago, Bernadette and myself stood in the driveway of my home with a picture of my husband with my daughter, and we remembered him then. And this was so special to be back here, and I'm amazed at the crowd.
It was really nice to come here with the collective and have the numbers back, and yeah, quite special.
And while the crowds may have felt like a return to normal, the $500 million upgrade of the Australian War Memorial meant the location of the dawn service and morning march had to be moved.
The Western Gardens was our only option, but I think it's gone very, very well. This is, of course, the bush capital, and the chance to actually commemorate Anzac Day in a bush setting, I think, is entirely appropriate.
Following the Veterans March, the Governor-General paid tribute not just to sacrifices made in times of war,
Australia, ACT,
but also to those made by ordinary Australians more recently closer to home.
In flood-affected communities in southwest Queensland and northern New South Wales, countless acts of bravery occurred.
Though crowd numbers this year were smaller than the years prior to the pandemic, they exceeded expectations, and organisers are confident they'll continue to grow in years to come.
You need to get together with...
Talking about the dawn service here in Brisbane as well. We never miss that. We always go and attend the dawn service here in Brisbane. And this year, once again, it was wonderful to see the large numbers come in once again. And, that feeling early in the morning, so we need to be there by 4 to get your spot. Otherwise, there's no standing spots, all the balconies, all the footwalks on the sides, and of course this shrine and all of Anzac Square is full. So because we just live up the road from there, so we always on Anzac Day we attend the dawn service. And here's a live coverage by Australian Indian Radio, the message from our governor at the at the Anzac Square, this shrine of remembrance yesterday.
Lands on which we gather this morning, and extend my greatest respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to all First Nations people who have served and continue to serve our country in the armed forces. 107 years ago today, in the misty dawn of Gallipoli, the first wave of Australian soldiers began their landing on the beaches at Anzac Cove. The first man ashore was a member of Queensland's 9th Infantry Battalion. The soldiers of the covering force were met with steep, rugged cliffs and intense enemy resistance. By the time the sun rose the next day, 2,000 Australian and New Zealand men had been killed or wounded. By the end of the 8-month-long campaign, more than 8,000 Australians would never make it home. But from this tragedy was born an enduring symbol, one that continues to demonstrate that in the face of adversity, optimism is generated by courage and tremendous strength is built on unity. The qualities of mateship, bravery and resourcefulness, bolstered by a ready willingness to laugh and to dare, shaped our infant nation's perception of self and helped make sense of an event that caused immense loss and heartache. Today, at commemorations throughout our state and much further afield, we stand together to reflect on this important legacy, one that does not seek to glorify, but instead solemnly honours those who lost their lives that day and those who have served our country in all conflicts and peacekeeping missions since. This day allows us to consider that the wounds suffered in combat are not only physical, they can be deeper and far more insidious. Our first Anzacs endured unimaginable horrors on the battlefields and in the trenches. They saw friends killed beside them. They lived with the dark and ceaseless thought that this day could be their last. There was enormous pressure placed on them to be stoic, to bury feelings of despair and distress. Shell shock, as post-traumatic stress disorder was then referred to, was largely misunderstood, misdiagnosed and mistreated. While we have come a long way since the last shots were fired in that war, I know, as a former doctor, that constantly enhancing our knowledge of mental health resilience will deliver better outcomes for all mental health conditions and not just for PTSD. Outside the theatre of war, our servicemen and women are often called upon to help in situations that are confronting and perilous. I was privileged to meet some of these incredible individuals during my time at Queensland Health, members of our Defence Reserves aiding in peacekeeping efforts in the Solomon Islands and assisting in our state's disaster responses. Recently, ADF personnel have supported Operation Flood Assist 2022, contributing to flood preparation, search and rescue efforts and clean-up activities in our state. Earlier this month, I was delighted to visit Maryboro's famed Anzac Memorial Walk and the Duncan Chapman statue and see them restored to their pre-flood magnificence. I was in awe of the tremendous collection of military and colonial memorabilia, the Maryborough Military and Colonial Museum, which provides such a testament to the heroes who fought in distant lands to ensure our way of life and prosperity.
And to ensure our way of life and prosperity. And there was an amazing speech by our governor. And of course, in attendance was the police commissioner, Katrina Carroll, and our Lord Mayor and Lady Mayoress Nina Serena were there as well. And representing the leader of opposition was John McGrath, and of course the other invited parties. And it is always organized in such a meticulous manner. It's very good, and all the people who are there so well behaved, and everyone coming together. The national anthem, the last post when that is played on the trumpet just gives you the goosebumps. It's just one amazing feeling to be there. Well, right now, let's get into the campaign trail and see what's happening. And this time around, I think the national security is high on the agenda. Well, it is at this point in time until the next issue emerges and takes on present. But at this point in time, high on the agenda is national security.
Nice to meet you. This is Jenny. Yeah. Not too bad. Okay.
In some seats, like this one on the New South Wales Central Coast, the Prime Minister is fighting the election at a grassroots local level.
And is that just a marketing gimmick, or does that work?
At the weekend, he pledged $20 million for facilities such as boat ramps, wharves and campsites.
Well, better go and ring up the register.
But avoided big picture questions about a security pact that poses a potential threat right on the nation's doorstep.
Why won't you talk to us about national security?
It was only the next day, while campaigning in the Red Centre, that he suddenly ramped up his rhetoric, talking about red lines.
I share the same red line that the United States has when it comes to these issues.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we won't be having Chinese military naval bases in our region on our doorstep.
The deal between the Solomon Islands and Beijing poses two competing challenges for the Prime Minister, and he'd initially talked down the impact of it and tried to stress the closeness of our Pacific family. On the one hand, Scott Morrison doesn't want to offend the government in Honiara by being seen to try to tell them what to do. On the other, he's also trying to win an election by convincing voters he is best placed to manage Australia's national security, and this agreement, if it leads to a base, would seem to undermine that argument.
This security agreement comes just days before a top American diplomat was set to visit the Solomon Islands.
The Biden administration is also unhappy with how this has all been handled. After a visit to the Solomons by top security advisor Kurt Campbell on Friday, the White House warned any steps towards a de facto permanent military presence, power projection capabilities or a military installation would give the US significant concerns and cause it to respond accordingly.
Well, the term red line, I think, has a somewhat checkered past in the sense that President Obama used the term in relation to the threat of Syrian use of chemical weapons. And when the Syrians went ahead and used chemical weapons on a large scale, there was no response. So there is always this risk in declaring a red line that you must then be seen to enforce it or lose credibility.
It's unclear what Australia could or would do if our red line is crossed in the Solomons, but military intervention is thought to be unlikely.
So no one's talking about bombing the Solomon Islands or invading the Solomon Islands. I think that the use of the term red line is unfortunate, but I think a Chinese base in the Solomon Islands would be a fundamental game-changing moment for our defence and security for one very simple reason. It would basically mean that for the first time since the end of the Second World War, the eastern seaboard of Australia would be open to threat in a war situation where we're facing the Chinese.
An arc of autocracy is challenging the rules-based order our grandparents had secured.
The uncertain security situation around the world filtered into today's Anzac Day commemorations.
Lest we forget.
The Defence Minister comparing Russian President Vladimir Putin to Adolf Hitler and again suggesting China was on a similar aggressive path to Nazi Germany in the 1930s.
The only way that you can preserve peace is to prepare for war and to be strong.
Words are one thing, action is another. This is a government which beats its chest. But when it comes to actually delivering and doing what needs to be done, this is a government which repeatedly fails.
With all the increasingly heated rhetoric flying around, it's worth reflecting just how much Australia's approach to China has shifted in recent years. A decade ago, both major parties spoke about opportunities to strengthen ties with our largest trading partner. Now, some links to Beijing are seen as a liability.
We got another Manchurian captain.
In February, the government accused Deputy Opposition Leader Richard Marles, without any real evidence, of being a Chinese puppet. And now ministers are again scrutinising a speech he gave 3 years ago to a Beijing-based university.
His startling comments and approach to China show a real national security concern should the Labor Party be elected.
The assertion that's being made by the government is just another desperate attempt to divert from their failings in the Pacific.
What do we know about Liberal Gladys Liu?
On the other side, an attack ad is also circulating targeting Melbourne Liberal MP Gladys Liu, who holds her seat of Chisholm on a razor-thin margin of 0.5%.
Well, let's call it for what it is. A desperate, dishonest, racist attack ad by the Labor Party.
Is the Labor Party at risk of vilifying Chinese Australians?
You're asking me that question. A number of these issues were raised
a few years ago in the Parliament. I think there were questions that she should have answered then, and it's legitimate for those to be answered.
Tomorrow, Labor will unveil how it plans to make Australia the first partner of choice for our Pacific neighbours if it wins office, including by boosting Australian broadcasting to the region. But many academics believe some of the language being used in the heat of a campaign, like talk of red lines or discussion about how this deal could have been stopped, is not particularly helpful.
It fails to sufficiently recognise the agency of Pacific states, and it suggests a degree of distrust.
Pacific Islands researcher Anna Poles brought the Solomon deal to global attention by tweeting the leaked draft last month. She believes much more attention needs to be paid to the many different regional leaders in the Solomons who oppose the deal, not just the Prime Minister in Honiara, particularly...
Well, of course, and that is a real concern, and attention should have been paid much earlier, and now that the deal's been done, it will take a lot of convincing and a lot of the sifting from US and probably Australia lobbying to see if that is contained in any which way or maybe even reversed. Well, right now, we're still on that campaign trail. The seat of Parramatta is turning into a key battleground for the candidates.
My name's Andrew, Labor's candidate for Parramatta. Morning, everybody. Another beautiful morning in Granville.
Deep in Labor's heartland, ALP candidate Andrew Charlton is trying to convince voters he's got what it takes to represent the multicultural seat of Parramatta.
I'm happy, I'm very happy.
3, 2, 1.
People care about the rising cost of living and the financial pressure that puts on their families. We have a significant plan to create jobs here in Parramatta. It starts with skills, building up TAFE and expanding university places. It goes on to broader infrastructure and specifically Labor's plan for a national reconstruction fund to support the regrowth of Australian industry.
His Liberal opponent, local businesswoman Maria Kovacic, is also focusing on the cost of living and creating jobs.
This is me. I'm Maria. I'm the Liberal candidate for Parramatta. Without a strong economy, we can't provide cost of living relief and we can't build new things. We can't build infrastructure.
But Labor leader Anthony Albanese is hoping his candidate's glittering credentials will encourage voters.
You know, Andrew Charlton is our candidate. Andrew is a success story. I want success stories, and I believe he is an outstanding candidate. He'll make a great member of Parliament here in Parramatta.
Andrew Charlton was Prime Minister Kevin Rudd's senior economic advisor during the global financial crisis in 2008. The father of 3 studied at Oxford and heads the local arm of a global consulting firm.
I think my experience as an economist and a business owner will help deliver a plan that enables families of Parramatta to build a better life for themselves and their kids.
I know you've been parachuted in, so you'll only be short-lived and you'll be up the ranks.
But Andrew Charlton is having to explain why he's the right candidate for Parramatta, given he lives nearly 30 kilometres away in the harbourside suburb of Bellevue Hill. He says he's planning to move.
I've bought a house in North Parramatta and I'm really excited about being part of this incredibly strong community.
If you lose, will you still move here?
Absolutely. We've bought a house, we're committed to Parramatta and we're really excited to be part of the community.
The Labor Party has faced criticism for overlooking diverse grassroots candidates. Union lawyer Arba Devasia from Labor's left was one hopeful who missed out.
People like me, people like the community in Parramatta, and the majority of Australians, the growing majority of Australians who are not that connected, are not represented in Parliament, and that's what I wanted to change.
Last month, she told 7:30 she'll still support Andrew Charlton despite her disappointment.
This isn't just one party, this is right across the spectrum, right? We see the same people again and again, and I thought that this was a real opportunity to change that, and we missed it.
I think Labor has a really diverse set of candidates at this election across the board. All I can do is present my plans for Parramatta to the voters over the next 5 weeks and let them decide.
I'm a local, I'm a mum, I'm a small business owner, and there's a bunch of information about me.
Well, we'll leave the campaign trail there, and of course there has always been a lot of calls to get the diverse representation in Parliament, and of course there have been many budding candidates who have had a go, and quite a lot of them unsuccessfully. It takes a lot of time and effort and resources to run a campaign. Well, we're wishing all the best for all the ones who are running. But right now, before we go to our daily India report, let's go to Ukraine.
Almost wherever you look, there are signs of destruction here, but also signs of renewal. This bridge is a pretty well-known image now. It was blown up by the Ukrainians to stop Russia's advance further into Kyiv, but already we're seeing signs of rebuilding. Local authorities have now built a new river crossing so that people aren't cut off from the capital now that more people are returning here. There's also been a massive effort to clean up the streets, which were littered with cars that had been shelled or shot at. The ones that exploded or caught fire are now stacked high on top of one another. But the ones that didn't explode are almost more shocking because you can see the detail, all the shrapnel that's gone through them and their shredded interiors, even signs that parents have put on their windscreens warning that children are inside. But despite those warnings, those vehicles have still been peppered with bullets. Staff at the local hospital that we went to are also rebuilding. The one that we visited had had its windows blown out, but it managed to stay open to help residents who'd been shot at or shelled. Many of the staff lived in the basement doing shifts. They're now getting back on their feet, but there's still some very grim tasks ahead, including exhuming some of the patients who didn't make it.
This is our city. It will be rebuilt. This clinic is needed because people are coming back. We shouldn't need to wait until the end of the war.
Irpin was absolutely hammered by Russian forces, but that hasn't stopped people returning here to try to get on with life. There's no power or water in many places, but people are still trying to clean up and make their homes livable again, like retired primary school teacher Luba, whose roof caught fire after an attack.
This is my apartment. It's my home. I had no idea how much I loved my home until now.
Of course, some of these homes won't be saved and it'll take a long time to completely restore infrastructure. But now that the Russians have left Kyiv's outskirts, people here do seem very keen to rebuild. There is a sense that if they waited until after the war ended, they might be waiting a long time.
And that is something that people don't want to do. That's why it's good to see, and that camaraderie, that people and that belief that that's their city, that's their home, and that they will rebuild. Well, right now it's time to go to our daily India report.
Welcome to the Daily India Report that brings you glimpses of the changing India. In our first story, India's flagship conference on geopolitics and geoeconomics, the Raisina Dialogue 2022, began in New Delhi. The three-day event has around 100 sessions with over 210 speakers from 90 countries. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurated the 7th edition of Raisina Dialogue 2022, India's flagship conference on geopolitics and geoeconomics, on April 25th. The Raisina Dialogue 2022 is being held in an in-person format over 3 days. President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, joined Prime Minister Modi as the chief guest at the dialogue. Several former prime ministers of different countries and other dignitaries are also participating in the event. The conference was held in a virtual format last year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. According to the statement released by the Indian Ministry of External Affairs, over 210 speakers from more than 90 countries will be taking part in the Raisina Dialogue 2022. The 2022 edition will have over 100 sessions with over 210 speakers from more than 90 countries and multilateral organizations. A large audience is also likely to join the dialogue across various social media platforms, it said. The theme of the 7th edition of the Raisina Dialogue is Terra Nova, Impassioned, Impatient and Imperiled, according to the Indian Ministry of External Affairs. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the UK is deepening the partnership of peace and prosperity with India. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, during his historic visit to India, hailed the partnership of peace and prosperity with India after his two-day visit to the country. He also said that the Swaminarayan Akshardham temple in Gujarat state is a true symbol of the strong links between India and the UK with its connection with Niasden temple in London. Along with his message, he also tweeted a video of his trip to India and was seen sharing his experience of his day visit while standing in front of the aesthetic Swaminarayan Akshardham temple. The UK Prime Minister visited the Akshardham temple in Gujarat's Gandhinagar on the first day of his two-day visit to India. Boris Johnson was seen holding the hand of a priest and taking a tour of the Akshardham temple. He was accompanied by his delegation. Johnson had also visited the Sabarmati Ashram in Ahmedabad. India suspends tourist visas issued to Chinese nationals. India has suspended tourist visas issued to Chinese nationals, global airlines body IATA told its member carriers on April 20th. India has been raising with China the plight of approximately 22,000 Indian students enrolled in Chinese universities who are unable to go back for physical classes. However, the neighboring country has to date refused to let them enter. These students had to leave their studies in China and come to India when the COVID-19 pandemic began at the beginning of 2020. In a circular issued on April 20th regarding India, the International Air Transport Association IATA said tourist visas issued to nationals of China are no longer valid. It said the following passengers are allowed to enter India: nationals of Bhutan, India, the Maldives and Nepal, passengers with a residence permit issued by India, passengers with a visa or an e-visa issued by India, passengers with an overseas citizen of India OCI card or booklet, passengers with a person of Indian origin card, and passengers with a diplomatic passport. The IATA also said that tourist visas with a validity of 10 years are no longer valid. India has urged Beijing to adopt a congenial stance in the matter as the continuation of the strict restrictions is putting the academic careers of thousands of Indian students in jeopardy. MEA spokesperson Arindam Bagchi had earlier said on March 17th. Bagchi said a Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson had stated on February 8th that China had been looking into the matter in a coordinated manner and the arrangements for allowing foreign students to return to China were being examined. But let me clarify that to date the Chinese side has not given any categorical response about the return of Indian students. We will continue to urge the Chinese side to adapt a congenial stance in the interest of our students and that they facilitate an early return to China so that our students can pursue their studies, Bagchi said. He said the issue was also taken up with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi by External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar during a meeting in Dushanbe in September last year. The two foreign ministers had held talks in the Tajik capital city on the sidelines of the conclave of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi says Jammu and Kashmir's youth will not have the same fate as their parents and grandparents. In his first visit after the abrogation of Article 370 in Jammu and Kashmir, Prime Minister Narendra Modi gave many gifts to the people of Jammu and Kashmir. In his address, he said that J&K's youth won't face the hardships their parents and grandparents suffered for want of opportunities and infrastructure. Modi assured them on Sunday as he called the Union Territory a new example of democracy and determination because of all-round development initiatives, a private investment worth rupees 38,000 crore over the past couple of years, and the return of tourists in droves. In his speech, he said, quote, "Believe my words, the youth of the valley mark my words that you will not face the difficulties faced by your parents and grandparents. This I will accomplish and I have come to assure you that." End quote. PM was addressing a rally in Pali village of Jammu's Sambha district where he addressed more than 30,000 elected rural representatives of Jammu and Kashmir as well as the nation on the occasion of Panchayati Raj Day. His address was broadcast to Gram Sabhas across India. He inaugurated and laid the foundation of road and power projects worth rupees 20,000 crore for J&K at his first general public function in the Union Territory after the abrogation of Article 370 in August 2019. Indian stocks dived 700 points in the early trade on 25th April amidst the sluggish global cues. The key Indian stock market benchmark indices started the session on 25th April with downbeat global sentiment and selling in IT and FMCG majors. High commodity prices, fears of tighter policies and rising COVID cases were some of the factors weighing on the investor sentiment. The BSE Sensex dropped to a low of 56,412 and was down around 600 points. The NSE Nifty 50 tanked below the 17,000 mark and was down 1.4%. Tata Steel was the major loser among the Sensex 30 shares, down 3.5%. Tech Mahindra, Dr. Reddy's, ITC, NTPC, Reliance Industries, Larsen & Toubro, Wipro and Sun Pharma were the other prominent losers. ICICI Bank, however, was up 1.5% on the back of robust Q4 performance. Axis Bank and Maruti were the only other gainers among the Sensex 30 shares. The broader markets were seen trading with steeper losses. The BSE Mid-Cap Index plunged 2% and the Small Cap Index dropped 1.7%. The overall breadth too was extremely bearish with 2,440 declining stocks versus 956 advancing shares on the BSE. Sectorally, the BSE Metal and Realty slumped 3.5% each. The Telecom Index tumbled 2.8%. The energy, FMCG, IT, capital goods and power indices too were down around 2% each. To the delight of Bollywood fans of Ranveer Singh, the first song of his much-awaited film Jayesh Bhai Zordar has been released. The song is already making a noise, being a firecracker. The first song of the upcoming...
And ladies and gentlemen, that's about all we have for you in today's Daily India Report. Right now, it's time to go to all the functions and events happening right here. And ladies and gentlemen, once again, it's been wonderful having your company and all of the people who have made comments and liked and shared our post. Thank you so much for that. I'd also like to place on record our appreciation for people who allow us to share our feed into those groups. So, even if it's shared in the group, if someone doesn't like it, they don't have to watch it. And other people, it might be of interest to them because it is of community interest. And if you have something that you'd like to discuss, we'd happily have you on the program as well. Well, right now it's time to say goodbye until tomorrow. And don't forget that tomorrow we have two segments. We have the 9 o'clock news, and then 10 o'clock we have the real estate update with Usa Chandra of GlobeNet Realty. And of course, this month's Music Junction went very well. Just a reminder that it is in two parts. There was a slight issue, but it is in two parts. So make sure if you watch the segments, watch both the segments, part 1 and part 2, on both Facebook or YouTube. And it's a wonderful program, a cross-section of stars. Sitaroki Maifil, very well presented by Suman Dua, because Savi could not, for some reason, make it to the studio. So Suman filled in for Savi. It's a wonderful program worth watching. So until tomorrow, it's goodbye from us.